Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Sorry, we're starting a bit late here. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm fighting with my local here a bit. I might have to jump around and find a server to work on. I was troubleshooting something for a customer and my server is in a bad state. So bear with me just a sec here. As always, you guys can ask a question in the chat and the Q&A or just use the raise hand feature. I'm gonna start a reinstall here. Should take just a minute, hopefully. We do have a pre-submitted question today, but I don't see that user on, so we'll hang tight for a minute on that particular ask. But let me know what questions that you might have. Hey Dave. Yes, absolutely. You can use a header container. Let me get signed into a server other than my currently screwed up local, and I'll talk through that a bit. Okay, here we go. Wonderful. Create a folder here really quickly. So let's create a flow here to put our form in. And create a brand new form. That's not what I wanted to do. And so your question is specific to header containers. So let's search for header. Here's a header container. Okay. Now this thing, its title or its property name is header container. So what we then are going to do, let's go build an active form flow. So come to active form flows and add active flow 1. Oh, I cannot type today. Create our rule here. And now we should be able to find our form rules, and there should be a hide control step here. And I'm going to put just try to make this a little dynamic. I'm going to put a true rule here. Not value is true. Is it value is true? Nope. Is true. Or do we call it true false rule now? True false rule. Okay, and just want to make this a little bit dynamic. So I'm going to put a checkbox on that form and check the value of that. So on one path I'll have hide, on the other path I will have show. And I'll go ahead and the form control, I can select this from the flow. So it'd be form data header container. And here under hide control, I'll select the same thing, form data header container. And then they can end. Now let me just set this to constant here to remove my validation. Let me save this and I'll run it startup, deselect is blocking, and let me find a checkbox here. So here's a checkbox, call it checkbox 1. All right, now that I have that, I'm going to come edit my active form flow, edit my flow. And I'm going to check the value of this true false rule here. So select from flow, form data, checkbox 1, value. I'm going to go ahead and, so if it's true, show the control. If it's false, hide the control. Okay. And then I'm going to say, run on value change in my checkbox and run at startup. Let me see if I got this right. I probably don't, knowing how the first test always goes. So checkbox, I'll say constant false and debug. So here's my form. Yeah. So it collapses down. What it's actually doing, which might not be ideal, but it looks like what it's going to do is collapse to the header itself, not hide the whole piece. Are you trying to hide the entirety of the header control? In that case, what I would probably do is something like, I might nest that. So I'm going to move this over and I'll find a layout and find a grid. Let me edit the properties of this grid. And then I'll move this here. Actually, let me rename that. I'm going to name this header parent grid, something like that. Save this. Now I can edit my active form flow. And I think what I'm going to try to do here is hide the grid, not the header container. So let's come back up to form data, header parent grid. Do the same thing here. Form data, header parent grid. Touch, I shouldn't have to update anything else. And debug. There's that. Yeah, so that doesn't really, I don't know that it's ideal because now you've just got a kind of odd header container there, but you could hide the grid that the header is in, though that might argue against needing a header container at all in that scenario. The header, if you pair the header with a vertical stack, you can kind of get some nice shrinking and growing behavior on the design of the form. Yeah, you could use header containers here, and you're free to come off mute as well, Dave, if you'd like. If you
it's just more of a visual formatting thing. I just saw that and was like, because we're like on a form, obviously you have like, we're doing healthcare, right? So we're member information and then caregiver information, and it's just kind of we have a checkbox just like that says, do you have a caregiver? And then yes, then it displays all the caregiver information.
Right.
And so we just kind of like to hide that little, like, for lack of a better word, header. I guess I could do I guess I could just do like a graphic, like an image rather.
Yeah, or just labels. Like if you had, like, you could have labels and then put your your text boxes below that. So the label could be patient. And a lot of times what the service team would do is construct the grid to hold everything. And then use, you might put, something like this, or you could have a label and then you could have another label, which you're then going to apply as text to. This could either actually just be a literal like dash, or you could turn this into
like the
like a horizontal line. Yeah, exactly.
So just one last thing about that this is I think maybe like a best practice is it if I have a ton of standard demographics for a member and a patient and all that fun stuff, should I put them in a container so that it would be easier to just hide the container than it would each individual? Like there's 35 fields.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, that'll get quite burdensome.
That will save a ton of time.
Yeah, because if you think about it, like just looking at our flow here, just for the pattern's sake, you're doing this pattern for every control.
For every control, and it is fun to do that.
Right. So you'd have something like awful, like show control, show control, show control, show control, show control,
like
just
30,
one after another.
Well, I just built an array in one of them and put in 35 objects inside that array. But yeah, that gets to be a pain when you change names, you change add subtract fields.
Multiple. Yep. Yeah. But yeah, I would say it'd be simpler from a maintenance perspective. It'd be simpler to keep them all in a container and just hide the container.
Okay.
And if you pair that with like a stack of some sort, you can design it in a space reclaiming way. This isn't. right? This is always going to
what
be.
is the stack, by the way? I think I've heard of that before, and I'm not.
Yeah, you come to layouts and you look at a vertical stack here. I'll show you. I'll give you an idea about what this can look like. This is our our concept of like responsive or space reclaiming. So you might have like I'm going to put a text box here. I'll put my header control, and then I'll put a label, right? And then let me run this again. And so if you run this, what is it not like my text box, really? Put some garbage data names in here. Oh, hold on. I need to edit my. Sorry. I am making a mistake here. Let me put this back in my grid. Select my grid. Move my. Well, let me try this. Move my grid. Put my header back in my grid. Bring my label back. I forgot I changed my visibility rule to be on my grid. So if I run this, you can see it'll collapse up and down with the content. So the vertical stack allows you, there's a vertical and horizontal stack, and it lets you do those space reclaiming designs where the visibility rules don't just hide an empty, don't hide but then show an empty space, but you can use space for, have the rest of the things shift to the left or the right or up or down accordingly.
Yeah.
Okay, and the other questions about USPS API? Let me install that.
Yeah, so I was I was actually just trying to. So I got it up and running. I registered. That was pretty simple.
Mm-hmm.
But and I did a couple, just simple flows. And then I was thinking, I was like, okay, well, if I'm building this form where I'm asking them to confirm the member's information,
Mm-hmm.
if they need to update it, why wouldn't I just do that in the form where, we've all done like Shopify or Amazon where it's like, hey, did you mean this address? Because this is actually the USPS address. I just didn't
Mm-hmm.
really like at a high level understand maybe what the flows would look like for that. Like I assume it would be, I guess I just don't really know how to run that on the form. Like I get how to run validations on the form through active form flows, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
just wondering how you would run a subflow on a form as you enter it. And I just didn't see anything in the documentation, which would be a
Like you want to,
great sample project to have available, by the way.
I think we have a version of that, but I bet it's not for specific to the USPS. Let's just look. So I would say, certain with the data flow, using data flow and data repeater, capitalize letters via, this might actually, let's see. How do you capitalize text on a form using a data flow? Let's see what we got here.
So I haven't looked into data flow. We just started. We just started last week. So data flow seems like it's the way that you would.
This is
something
your
on a
active form flow. Your active form flow would work like if you look at your form we just built here. This example uses data flows because it's we built this pre-7.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at an active form flow, like we were just looking at show controls, right? But if under form rules, there is a it is set control value step here. Now, if I were going to run this, I could select from the flow and I could say form data, where is it? Text box value. And you can imagine that I have, I'm just gonna use a placeholder step here. You can imagine that I have the USPS step here, right? This is USPS address verification. And what you would do is, in the same way we're triggering this flow to run on that checkbox value change, you could have it be a value change on a text box. So as I start to type in to my text box, I could have, in fact, let me do it this way. I'm gonna not save anything. I'm gonna add a different, I'm gonna add a new active form flow, and I'll show you explicitly what I mean here. Excuse me. So active form flow add. This will be active flow 2. And what we'll do is I'm going to use a fetch entity step to use a database return as if it's my my USPS step. But I'm going to type in an email. So I'm going to fetch from the account table. And if I get a result, I'm going to pass that result back. I'm going to use this show path for one result just to make my mapping a little easier. And what I'll do is I'll come to form rules and I'll say set control value. I'm going to put this on the result path. You can imagine this is result versus like error. And if, yeah, so if I fetch it, yeah, okay. So I'm gonna set the control value equal to the entity result email address that gets returned. And if there's no results, I'm going to leave it as the value that it was already set to. I'll walk back through this in a little bit more detail. So if I don't get anything, I won't, actually, I don't need to do anything. I won't do anything. Try to clean this up a little bit. And my fetch entity step here, I'll do my fetch criteria and I'll say the email address. And I'll change my query match type to starts with. This is all specific to fetch entities, not to your USPS example, but it should get the idea across of running a active form flow to do data population, not just validation and visibility. I'll come to text box here and I'll say on stop typing. It wants my results here. I'll just connect my results to the end step as well. Oh, okay. Oh, email address. Of course, that needs to come from form data, text box value. Yep. And set control is entity result is not valid. Why not? Entity result, email address. Nonsense. Why is that not valid? Oh, sorry. That's the control form data text box. Now that'll give me value, and the value will be entity result email address. Sorry, I'm using the set value step incorrectly there. All right, there we go.
Oh, gotcha. So entity is the data set that you just, the result of the query that you pulled from said database.
Yeah, right. It always shows the default name for the fetch entities result is going to be entity results. That's what you can change the name.
Anytime I want to pull data from a database, a data store of any sort, fetch entities is a good step to follow.
Correct. Oh, there it goes. So yeah, that's doing some pre-population. If I just put in garbage text, it won't give me anything. If I put in, that's not going to do it. Yeah, I can pre-populate.
Oh, cool.
And then you'll notice if you look at the rule flow here under its executions, we can actually see it running. Sometimes it's returning no results. And if we want to use the debugger, we can see input output data to see, all right, we passed in a null here. Probably you would do a null check here to make sure you're not hitting your USPS API, or in this example, your database. But this same pattern, really what we're doing is using set control value along with the active form control inside the active form flow, and then kind of using the triggering here to allow us to get this type ahead.
Oh, gotcha. And the set control value was what was that pointed at? That or fed by? That was the.
And yeah, the set control value, you point it. Let me come back in.
Is that
you
the form object?
Yeah, exactly. It's the text box. So
gotcha. So it's saying monitor this this object on the form and analyze it and run whatever.
Yeah, so it's going to give you a value here based on the form control you specify. Gotcha. Right, and then it'll say what it's going to say is update this thing's value with this value. But the diagram itself is the owner of calling the set control value step itself, right? If you have no results or if you have multiple results, nothing will happen. If you get a result back, it'll say pass that value into the text box as its value now. That's kind of the way.
I'll take a swing at the USPS flow, and then I might reach out to you guys and see if there's like a previous project that someone put together and just kind of a high level just a basic form verification of the address as they're typing, that type of thing. But I'll give that the old call. Give it 10 minutes, as they say, right?
That's right. That's the rule.
Yep.
Anything else we can help you out with today, man?
That was really cool. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Happy to help.
I mean, I'm going to have 1,000 more questions, but yeah.
No, please. That's what this is for. All right. Emmeline has a question for us. How to customize the decisions login page. How to redirect to a custom-built dashboard upon login to the decisions portal. When to install decisions of self-hosting or IIS hosting. So to the login page, it's different in V7 and V8. I think if we just search for login page customization, there's some default customization we can do through the application. But if you actually want to completely control this, you're going to need to use do a little bit of coding to actually create your own login page. So either one of these links, Emmeline, I guess if you review this recording, is where you'll want to start. If you want to just update the icon on the login page, you can do that through system settings. If you need to do something more sophisticated, you want to completely control the page, like you see in the screenshot here, you are going to need to dive into doing a little bit of SDK work. Not much at all, but just a little bit. That's a kind of an odd namespace to use for this particular example, unit test web core controllers. But anyways, next question here is how to redirect to a custom built dashboard upon login. I think the simplest way is to use, there's these login flows. So if I come to system settings and I look at portal settings and I search for login, you'll see there is two login flows here, and these run when a user logs in. And you can, in the login user flow, show before portal loads. This might make a call to a third-party system to validate something. And then login user flow shows a form to a user. So this bottom one, if you use this in concert with a step we call inform session, which I think I could find here, inform session. Yeah, using the inform session step to navigate, this step will let you navigate a user around the portal. So you could build a login user flow. In that user flow, you could use an inform session and then develop and then have some sort of dynamic way to say, for this user, send them to this page. And you would actually use the navigate behavior on the inform session, which you can see a screenshot of here. These behavior options, you can navigate, give it a folder ID and a page name. Now, of course, the screenshot's static, but you could run a truth table or make a database call or do something if this data needed to be more dynamic. And then you redirect that user to the folder and page that you specify here. Of course, your example would remove this flow or this form from, it would just have effectively a single inform session step, unless, of course, it needs more dynamic steps there to actually determine what folder and page name to call. And the last question is when to install decisions as self-hosted or IIS hosting. Really, if you're not running, only use IIS if you're running any other web applications on the same server as decisions. If not, it keeps things simpler just to use embedded hosting. So it's kind of a, what do you prefer? We see most people running 7 removing the IIS dependency, unless of course they have another web application also running on the decision server.
I just tried both, and self-hosted is way faster and easier to manage.
Yep, absolutely.
Unless you're doing like a subdomain or virtual directory or something, IIS is a real pain.
Yeah, absolutely. It's it just I find it, I much prefer it, but if there are these other dependencies, then you'd need to use the sort of older style hosting option of IIS as a web server. Okay, anybody else got any questions? That's our only pre-submitted for this afternoon.
I mean, while you're on here, I have a question. I have yet to really dive deep into the repo server. Like, what would be a kind of a standard flow if I'm like working with a coworker and we're just kind of we're working on the same the same project, and he uploads a form, I upload a form, you know, that type of thing. It's a little bit in the documentation, but it'd be interesting to see it in real time if you have that set up.
I don't. Let me see. Do we have a designer repo set up? Oh, look at that. So we can go. We've got. Let me just make sure it's a test server 1010. Cool. So if I come back to our lunch and learn folder, I'm going to go ahead and add it to a project. So you would come to the folder that's holding your project, right? And you would run design repository add to project, and this is going to allow us to create a project name. And I'll call this thing lunch and learn test 1, continue. And I want to add the folder and its contents. Okay, and then it's actually, so far what we've done so far, now you'll notice on the right hand side the project name is changed in the designer view, but I haven't committed it to the repo server. So I can commit this. Now yeah, okay, good. I'm already connected as the admin account, and I'll just say first check-in, and you're going to see it's going to check in all the contents here, my 2 rule flows, my active form flows, my folder, flow 1, flow 2, and form 1, and I can commit this. So if the example is what's happening, I'm going to create a form here, right? You know, form 2, fine. I'm not going to actually set up anything on form 2. Now form 2, because it's now in the lunch and learn folder, is going to be dumped into the lunch and learn project automatically. So if I come back to the repo server and say check in changes, I should only get form 2. And I could say, you know, checking in new form.
Man, do you know how much easier this is than GitHub?
No, it's pretty, it can be pretty straightforward. But imagine it's just you and me, and we're working together. We're just adding new things. We're doing this independently of one another. The problem becomes when you've edited form 2 and I've edited form 2. Well, actually, if we're on the same server, that wouldn't be a problem.
We'd have a lock on it, right? It would warn you, hey, okay, yeah. So
right, exactly. But and then you just check everything in. And every time you check in, just come to the parent folder, check in changes. It'll show you a list of things. There's nothing to do here. If I were to edit this form, and it's not really checking anything. So if I come in here and just save it, it's looking at the timestamps. It's not looking at the content anyway. So I didn't change anything, but I saved it. If I look at check in changes, now form 2 shows again. I can include only my changes. If I hit any issues, but I know it's the right thing and I want to override any problems, I can force check in. But either way, it gives me, it just lets me check those things in. So there's this like relationship between the local project, which is saved on the application server, and then the project checked into the repository, and they get in sync every time you do a check-in or check-out, respectively. But yeah, if you're both working on the same server, there's locks applied when you're in an edit session, so you can't override each other's lock. I mean, you can, but you would have to say I'm gonna break, you know, Will's lock, and then you can check your changes in. Either you can say, hey, I'm gonna check all our stuff in. Anything you don't want me to check in, and I can tell you, or you can just check in your work. Either way, it all just if there's no sort of conflict, like if in a place where maybe you and me were both working on different servers and checking in the repo, and we had both edited our local version of form 2, that's where we have to sit down and figure out whose we should take, as there's no concept of a real diff in our world. But assuming that you're on a shared server, that shouldn't be a concern. But yeah, using the repo server should be as straightforward as that from a checking in perspective.
Yeah, so it's not like it's like Git, only not as strict, which is actually fine. And then I assume there's like a commit to production, or is that a?
Yeah, and what you would actually do is come into production. You'd come to system designer repository, you'd find your project. So here, like, imagine I'd either check out the I'd come check out the project for the first time. Let's assume I'd select it and check it out on a prod, and it would then download and deploy itself onto production. If the project already exists and I wanted to get a more current version or switch the branch, I'd come to the same location, come here and say, check out project or change branch, depending on what version control.
Gotcha. So
strategy.
checkout is actually deploy to prod.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
if you're on prod,
if you're on
right?
prod, okay.
I'm assuming I logged into production and then checked the project out.
I got you.
You're not pushing to prod, you're pulling down to prod.
I see. So we will actually have separate logins then for each. Well, the two instances, non-prod and prod, and then
yes, correct.
Gotcha. Okay, I see. So if I built everything in my dev QA box, then I go log into prod, I would be able to then check that out, and that actually pulls it from non-prod and publishes it up to where I'm logged in which is prod.
Yeah, exactly. That's right.
Gotcha.
Now, you could have the same logins for all the servers if you're using single sign-on, just as a note.
Yeah.
But yes, assuming you're not, then you do have individual logins for each. But yeah, I mean, that is the world's most rudimentary repo check-in example, but in a nutshell, that's how it should work. What other questions might anyone in the have today? Okay. Well, we're after 12:30, so normally we'll call it a day. Last call for any questions from anybody. All righty. Okay, well, let me just check the chat again here. All right. Thanks everybody for your time today. I believe Eric Wilmerink, our product manager, is going to be running Lunch and Learn tomorrow. So see you guys same time tomorrow. Have a great afternoon, everyone.